You guys I know have heard of the revenue intelligence category because it is absolutely exploding. Forrester says there's a ton of money being pumped into it. And Gartner says the future is coming fast, in terms of what this is going to continue to look like and what it will be going forward. And, that's for good reason. It is absolutely changing the way that we run sales organizations. These are just two examples among numerous examples that are out there, but, Clary giving you kind of the ability to say, hey, that should or should not be in my forecast based on whether we're engaged in an opportunity. And Gong being able to say, hey, you ought to get more multi-threaded, get to know more people in the account, because that raises your average ticket price. Now, we knew these things before. I mean, the things that are, these applications are telling us aren't, mysteries, so to speak. But now we can measure it and we can see it with data. And that has the impact of starting to change behavior in our organizations. And that's where I think the impact really starts to lie, as well as our ability to, certainly act on it in a more kind of measurable, consistent fashion. So, hey, quick poll out to the group. If you don't mind just putting into the chat, do you use the revenue intelligence platform today? There's a lot of them out there. By the way, there's dozens of them out there. So well beyond Clary and Gong. But go ahead, if you don't mind, to just drop it in the chat. What do you use if you use one? MMB, Gong, Daryl, Clary and Gong, Charles, Avizo. And Steve, I think you guys, last I talked to you guys, used Outreach, and you were using some of the capabilities there. Is that right?
Yes, Outreach, Clary, and Chorus, but soon switching over to a new tool. We're not sure which one yet, looking at Gong and others.
Got it. So everyone's familiar with these applications, which is not a surprise whatsoever. Let me give you guys the definition. This is actually Gartner's definition of revenue intelligence and the latest research that they published. It's certainly broader than this, but this is their kind of most finite definition. So capturing seller activity, using that to measure deal health, and then guiding our sellers on what the next best action is. So Gartner's kind of definition around what this is doing. And then, let me give you the analogy, because there's an analog here. It's very, very similar. When we talk about sales management intelligence, we're talking about capturing manager activity, measuring sales team health, and then guiding managers' next actions. So that's how kind of sales management intelligence kind of aligns to revenue intelligence. And we're going to talk more about kind of the implications of what that allows you to do. But beyond that, why now? Why do we feel like, hey, this is coming kind of now at this moment? Well, it's absolutely based on the fact that, the current environment that we found ourselves in, the decentralized, distributed, virtual, more virtual than ever environment, has led to the need to say, we've got to look hard at how we're operating as a leadership team, as a management team, the same way we're looking at digital selling, and evolve that or be left behind. And there's all kinds of implications associated to that. We have done countless interviews, because arguably this is, the job of everyone on the phone to figure this out and get this right for your organization. And, come up with this kind of basic framework for thinking about the management cadence. And there's a ton of interesting insights, that we've gathered. If you look on the left, with team, we break down internal versus external. And the most obvious insight there is, there's a lot of time being spent on outlining the internal cadence. A lot less time goes into outlining the external cadence. And what happens is there's a tremendous amount of variability in how that's actually being executed. Paul's going to talk more about that, because we are seeing that in the data. And then on the right, when you look at without team, again, these are all really important activities. We wouldn't say get rid of them. I mean, these are critical activities. But what we know is that if you want managers to influence the productivity of their teams, it's hard for them to do that when they're not with their teams. So as you think about balancing the left and the right, there's a balance there that you ultimately need to kind of begin to think about as you begin to get to the right answer. And here's a little bit of what it looks like kind of at its best. And this is an eye chart, so please don't stare too closely at it. But the point here is that despite all the SaaSification that's taking place in the world today, and all of these types of processes, I mean, largely this lives in a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint or a PDF. And that's kind of where we see it living, as we talk to and engage with chief revenue officers. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because the result of that, or the downstream impact of that, is if you can't see it and you can't measure it, there's a tremendous amount of variability associated to how that is actually being executed in your organization today. And the issues that stem from that, you guys are all familiar with, because, there's all the buzz around the great resignation, and, people don't leave companies, they leave managers, and kind of what does it take to bring people into an organization and keep them and ramp them. And, arguably we're kind of flying a little bit blind here. And let me give you guys a little bit of the analogy. You would not go out and develop your sales process or sales motion and evolve that without data. You just wouldn't do that. You'd look at how many sales calls you're making. You'd look at how that's translating in your funnel, and a whole host of other things that you would look at. But that is exactly what we're doing today when we evolve and build our management cadence. We are doing it absent this type of information around what is actually happening in the organization. And again, we think that's crazy, and inevitably that is going to change.